There's no finishing hold here per se, no submission hold or punishment hold. There is a pin attempt, um, but I wanted to include this just because it's such a clean go behind takedown, and the drag down with the waist lock is so reminiscent of what gets taught in a lot of Gracie Jiu Jitsu curriculums, and still like a lot of modern Brazilian Jiu Jitsu guys are way more likely to do waist style drag downs rather than big throws like a judoka or a Greco Roman wrestler. Or, the drag down takedowns are much more popular with modern grapplers when they're from a BJJ background. And this particular clip really looks like it would be at home with that, except the ending is very different, right? Because the wrestler here is trying to obtain a pin. That's his whole objective. He's not necessarily trying to do a punishment hold. And later on in this particular match, not included in this sub clip that I've isolated here, it does end up in a leg entanglement, and I'll cover that in another video. But just this particular novel pinning position, I think, is really interesting, and it just the way it is, it could open up into like electric chair finishes and things like that. But again, he's only really using this for a pin. Um, when modern grapplers look at some of these pins, and they might just dismiss them by saying like, oh, well, I don't win my match by pinning the guy this way. It's not a positional control. I don't get any points. But one of the things that I would challenge people to reconsider is some of these pins, particularly very uncomfortable ones like this, where there's full body compression, they take a little something out of the athlete, right? If they're done correctly. So if you can compress an athlete's frame in a very uncomfortable way and disrupt their breathing, and also get them to burn out some of their core muscles, that in and of itself is a very valuable objective, because so much of what we do in modern grappling depends on our core being intact and strong and not burned out. And some of these old pins, even though it's not necessarily an automatic win of the match, just along the way, if you've burned out their core, if you've messed with their breathing, if you've made them really uncomfortable, there's not only those physiological advantages to that, meaning like you're kind of cooking your opponent, right? But there's also a little bit of a mental one. Being stuck in these strange pins that BJJ guys aren't used to having to deal with, and they don't always have like a clear roadmap for how to get out of them. I think there's also a psychological element to that that's undervalued, and it's definitely worth exploring. And I myself, in my own grapples, do these sorts of things all the time. Some of my fellow black belts look at me like I'm an alien when I do it. I don't care. They don't understand why I'm doing it, and I've deigned to explain it to one or two of them who I thought might get it. But really, if you've ever experimented with it, it yields its own rewards, and most of them are along the lines of those I've explained.